the last day I was in the hospital, this lady, precious saint, she comes up to me and she goes, I just want to tell you something. I know you're leaving here today, but this is so comical because you see these numbers right here. They cannot figure out how you're alive. You're not supposed to be here, but it's a miracle.
Welcome to Going Rogue with Lara Logan. My guests today are Steve and Bev Maxwell, and their story is incredible. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to die? What you might see, what you might hear? And very few of us have any idea what that's actually like. But that's what happened to Steve Maxwell. He died and came back. So we're going to find out what that was like for him and for those around him. These are two people I have known for some time now, both very, very special to me. I would say that you for sure are doing God's work every day of your lives. They bring light and joy and warmth everywhere they go and inspire people. So I think you will find this inspiring. But Steve, I want to start with you just straight off the bat. What does it look like?
Well, I would say, what does it feel like first? And then the look. But, I was released from my body while in an ambulance. And the first thing you feel is freedom. You feel peace. You feel a love. No fear. And I'm literally floating in toward the stars, and the Lord himself, Jesus Christ, comes to my side and begins speaking with me. And in that world, you don't hear words. You hear words, but through thought. So he impressed upon me, and I received what he was impressing. And then when I spoke back the same way, it was through thought. And it was the most remarkable, peaceful time. There are no words on earth that can explain it. And then he began showing me and teaching me things that was going on in the spiritual realm, which we can get into more detail later. But so it was a very peaceful experience. I share with people every opportunity I get. We always fear death, but God's batting 1,000. We're all going to meet that day one day, unless the Lord comes. But don't fear it. If you know God, know the Lord, you do not have to fear death. Even what we would consider a terrible death here on this earth.
Right.
You're never alone. You're never alone.
If you know God.
If you know the Lord.
I wonder what it's like if you don't.
Thankfully, I didn't experience that.
For over 11 years, Patriot Mobile has been America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. They've stood in the gap for every American who believes that faith, family, and freedom are worth fighting for. They are the real deal. But did you know they've got cutting-edge technology as well? Switching is easy. No store visits, no hassle. Keep your number, keep your phone, or upgrade. Their 100% US-based team can activate you in minutes over the phone. And get this, Patriot Mobile is one of the few carriers with access to all 3 major US networks. What does that mean? Exceptional coverage nationwide. Plus, they can even put a second number on a different network on one phone. So it's like carrying 2 phones in one. And they have unlimited data plans, mobile hotspots, international roaming, and home internet backup. You can't get all of this from the big guys. So what are you waiting for? Make the switch today and experience the Patriot Mobile difference. Go to patriotmobile.com/Lara or call 972-PATRIOT and use promo code LARA for a free month of service. Switch to Patriot Mobile today. That's patriotmobile.com/Lara or call 972-PATRIOT. You two have known each other a lot. How many years have you been married now?
We've been married 42 years. We know each other 5 years before? Yeah. So
my
pretty
first
much
memory of him was second grade. Yeah.
Second grade?
Second grade.
Where was that?
He was in the second grade. I took piano lessons from my aunt who lived right up in front of me, and I would walk to piano lessons, and his sister took piano lessons right after me. So he and his mother, his brother, and his sister would be sitting in the car waiting to drop Suzanne off for piano lessons as I was leaving. So when I would walk out of my aunt's house, this little burr-headed urchin, literally shirtless urchin, was hanging out of the car, beating on the side of the car, saying, "Hey, girl, what's your name?" As I walked off swinging my ponytail.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah. I was just like, oh. So that
you were a thug.
I was a thug.
Even then?
Yeah.
How old are you?
I don't know. Second grade, I think. What is that?
Second or third grade, yeah.
7 or 8.
Young.
Yeah.
Oh, my word. What did you think?
Oh, I had 3 brothers, so I just had no time for it. I just walked
She paid
home.
me no attention.
No attention at all.
Was she cute as a button?
Oh, yeah. She was cute. Junior high, she really got cute. That's when we really started talking to each other.
Making eyes at each other.
I have love letters at age 13, I guess.
Oh, yeah, I have. Yeah, love letters. He wrote me at
13-year-old
age
love
13
letters,
years old.
We didn't have social media. You had to write letters back in those days.
I know, it was beautiful.
Because my mom and
wasn't it?
dad wouldn't let me use the phone, so you had to write letters.
Because you were too young or too naughty?
I was too young and naughty, probably. Truth be known.
He was naughty.
And where was this?
We live in a small community called Lithia Pinecrest. It's just east
In
of Tampa.
Florida.
It's in Florida, Tampa, Florida, east of Tampa.
Very
And-
rural, very
Yeah,
rural,
small community.
sweet community. It was a great place to grow up.
And you're still in Florida.
Yes.
We're still there. We came to Texas for almost 10 years in
Yeah.
the military and then went back to Florida when we got out of the military.
Because you were in the military?
I was.
What did you do?
United States
Which
Navy.
branch? Yes.
I joined the Navy to see the world. They sent me to Beeville, Texas. And I was an air traffic controller there and met my business partner there. And we're still partners today. We were 22, 23, 24 years old. Yeah.
Wow.
So
That's incredible. Okay, and Steve, how would you describe what you do? I know, Viv, right?
He'd tell you, but then we have to kill you because we don't know.
I'll tell you, we're Christians. I was raised in a Christian home, and that's been a great benefit. My partner became a Christian at a very young age, and we began, we had nothing. His dad worked in refineries in Texas. My dad was a state trooper in Florida. We come from nothing, and but we just started dreaming back in those days about, okay, Lord, what do you want us to do with our lives? So we came up with this idea. What if we could produce 100 financially independent people before we died that would give back to the kingdom and give back to just good people that do good things with the money? And that's the dream we had at age 24, working out in a ratty old gym behind his house, an old barn. And so how do you do that? 2 kids, dropped out of college, only in America, by the way. And we said, hey, let's start companies and let's bring in partners. And when they've proven themselves, we'll give them part of the company. And that's what we've been doing our whole career.
And you did it pretty well.
Yeah, business is up and down. We have several companies,
Yeah.
and nothing's easy. Some do very well, some don't. But through it all, yes, God has blessed us immensely. And we've tried to keep biblical principles in place in all of our companies. The company is really an extension of the kingdom of God. That's how we saw it. Wow. It's not really, free enterprise, you got to find a need for the consumer. You got to provide that need, provide a good product. You got to take a big chance. It's an act of faith. There's a big difference between free enterprise and Wall Street. Okay, there's a big difference there. Free enterprise is an entrepreneur starting their own deal. You got all the risks that are involved, trying to make payroll, trying to create a product, all those things. When you meet true entrepreneurs, you find people who are salt of the earth, very humble people, versus the Wall Street, the venture capitalists, which is fine if you're in that world, but it's not the same.
Sure.
I think a lot of people get that confused. So that's what we've been doing. So, and how do you find, how do you start a company? It begins with your interests in mind. My partner in Texas here, his background is oil and refineries and maintenance and that type of thing. So he's got several companies in that realm. My love was farming, agriculture. My grandfather was a farmer in Georgia, where I get my accent from. And so all of my businesses wrap around farming. But it's a software company that offers software to farming. It's a packaging company. But they're all related to farming. And I spent a good almost 20 years in the produce industry. So before I started my own business. So anyway, that's how we got started, and that's what we do until 2020. And then we started down another path in 2020 with the nonprofit.
And that path was creating Citizens Defending Freedom.
Correct. Yeah.
Which is an organization. How would you describe what CDF does?
Well, again, we tried to take, after the 2020 election, most of us realized something really bad happened. Of course, the evidence is all coming out now. We were right. But
you mean it wasn't the most secure election in history?
Go figure.
I mean, can you believe?
You got to find out who made that statement, right? What's their motivation behind that statement, right? Don't look behind the mirror. The curtain, right? Wizard of Oz.
Don't even question. Don't you dare question.
That's right.
Yeah.
So 2020 happens, and so that was in November. So we just get on the phone. My partner and I, we start saying, okay, what just happened here? This is not good.
Right.
And I call it divine intervention from God. We get connected to several people. One very prominent person we got connected with was Mike Ferris, who was at that time was CEO of Alliance Defending Freedom. And he came to our offices. He had not traveled for a year because his wife had been really sick. But he got word that we were going to try to do something. I don't even know. I guess things came through another friend. But so Mike comes to our office, and we're saying, Mike, what's going on? That was in February. In December, we met with Senator Rand Paul at Mar-a-Lago at an event there. And to his credit, Senator Paul, whether you like him or not, he told us the truth of what was happening.
Which was?
It was the corruption was so deep in Washington that it's not going to get fixed in Washington. We got to start from the bottom up and totally rebuild the country. And he described, I'll put it to you this way, he said, the reason we got the problem is we don't have term limits, number one, and number two, it's the best job these people have ever had. And I specifically asked him, I have pictures of me talking to him. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, Steve, I could leave here today and go back to Kentucky, and I could become a doctor and feed my family. Most of these people couldn't get a job as a janitor, yet they're becoming very wealthy. And I'll leave it at that. So we put two and two together. The corruption, now we know. USA dollars kicked back and all that kind of stuff. So the point was we began looking at this, and then we began doing research in our own local county. We're a very conservative county between Tampa and Orlando, great sheriff, Grady Judd. And all of a sudden we did some homework there. We found like 29 NGOs in our county, being funded by bad people. And so long story short, Laura, we saw that the enemy had crept into the school system. They had crept into our agencies at the local level. And so then the question, entrepreneur, okay, I got to build a product.
Yeah.
Okay, what does the average citizen need to push back? And so I use the example of the ACLU going after our school boards across the country and pushing Title IX. That Johnny gets to play, Sally's sports and go to Sally's bathroom. You get two or three ACLU attorneys, right, at a school board. Now think about this. The school board is normally part-time, right? They didn't sign up for this. They're worried about curriculum and things like that. So they didn't sign up. All of a sudden, they're there. The school board attorney's job is to keep the school board out of a lawsuit. So they just give a little ground. Yeah. This time, a little ground. Then you got a mom or a dad with 3 minutes and a microphone opposing it. And that was it.
It's amazing.
There was no pastor there. There was no, right?
When you're allowed. You're allowed to.
So the question, you're right. Yeah, right. When you're allowed. So the question we asked ourselves was, what does that mom need to go up against the ACLU in that situation? Well, she needed real intelligence. She needed to know what was really going on in that community. She needed to have her own media outlet where she could get her story out. And she needed hands-on legal at the grassroots level. And that's what we put together with Citizens Defending Freedom. And Mike Ferris, I go back to Mike. Mike told us if we could build that, nobody was successful building it at grassroots level up at that time. He said, but if you could do it, you will win 9 out of 10 times. And he was wrong. 4.5 years later, we're undefeated. And I mean over 100.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
Yeah.
You know, we're undefeated, 130. So what's happening, and it should be an encouragement for people, is all we have to do is stand our ground.
Yes.
Right? Just stand firm, show up. And our enemy is so weak when it comes to real people pushing back. They've never had any resistance, really.
No.
So at the local level, you can do that and do it in the spirit of love. And we do it in, we're a Christian organization. We're going to spread the gospel as we go, but we're going to stand firm, put on the full righteousness of God and stand firm in that community. And that's that's CDF. And that later on, we formed the Remnant Alliance, which is a system that we work with the local church and the local pastor. It's an educational system. And then that church becomes what we call activated in the sense that they become aware of their community. And our organization connects with that church. And then when they find nefarious things going on, we come with our tools. And I'll close with this. It's sort of like what John Eldredge said in one of his books, a great book he wrote called Moving Mountains. He said, once the church wakes up, it's like we're thrown on the beaches of Normandy as third graders. We don't know how to fight in this war. And it's time to put new wine in new wineskins. So that's what we're doing. This is a spiritual battle. And so what are the tools required to win? And Apostle John was very clear. We need the blood of the Lamb, the word of our testimony, which that means we're active out there in that community, and we have courage. And we provide the people the tools they need to stand firm. That's all we do.
What were you going to say, Bev?
He covered it. The difference in just showing up at a school board meeting and showing up with tools at a school board meeting,
And
showing
training.
up with the support and training and intelligence and knowing what you're talking. Because how do I, in a small community, really know what's going on in the bowels of that, right?
No, it's very hard. Yeah.
And a lot of the parents didn't know what was going on. Some of the school board members, in their defense, they're volunteers. They didn't know.
Sure.
Right? So, and their job is to stay out of litigation and stay out of trouble. And so when the other side is growling and gnarling and they're just, okay, appease. And it's a slippery slope.
Why are so many young people struggling to have babies today? Birth rates in the US are at record lows, and that's partly because testosterone levels are dropping all the time. According to some studies, T levels are roughly half of what they were 50 years ago. And if we don't reverse this trend, we could be looking at population collapse. And it's why we partnered with CHOQ. They're a Patriot-owned supplement company, and their mission is to save mankind from extinction. They have something called the Male Vitality Stack, and it's been shown in clinical trials to boost your free testosterone by 87% in just 21 days. That is not just a statistic. You will feel it. And ladies, you'll be pleased to know it's not just for men. The Female Vitality Stack addresses just about every complaint a woman can have: stress, mood, hormones, energy, and focus. And it'll even help you keep up with your man. So go to CHOQ.com and use code LARA for 17.76% off your subscription. Cancel anytime. Or you can also call 50-CHOQ 3000 and tell them Lara sent you.
So, we don't think the way our enemy thinks. We're good people. We don't sit around and say, okay, how can we have a riot and tear down whatever? We don't think that way. Who thinks that way? So it's easy for the enemy to come in and pick us off because, number one, we don't like to fight. Now, we will fight if we have to fight, but we don't like to fight. We're trying to raise our families, trying to run our companies.
Yeah.
We're trying to do good things. To coach Little League, our church, whatever.
Yes.
These other people don't think that way. They've been trained differently, almost militantly, and we're like lambs going to slaughter. So that's what we saw. There's the contrast. And so what do? We come in with that support mechanism for that American citizen and that pastor that says, we've had enough. We're going to stand for our kingdom.
So what are your measures of success with that?
Oh, that's a great question. The best way to measure is when we have a conflict and we come out the other end winning. So, for example, we had a pastor here in Austin, Texas. The Biden administration had gone after her, claiming he was a part of the Biden bus deal. Remember that That
yes,
case?
of
Okay.
course. That was the case when Kamala Harris came with her supporters
That's right.
during the 2020 campaign.
Yep.
And she was unpopular, not well received
Yeah.
in Texas.
That's exactly
and so
right.
people drove close to the bus, right, and were honking at the bus.
Yep, that's
and,
it.
and there was a protest at one of the rallies. In fact, people were so unhappy, she didn't get out.
That's
Did
right.
she? She didn't
No,
get out of the
yeah.
bus. And
Well,
they kind of followed her, and that
Yeah.
made her really mad.
So behind the scenes, the Department of Justice at that time was weaponized, which we've seen over and over again. I think it's over 20 attorneys, Soros grade, I call it attorneys, came after them and several other people. We were involved in that, and bottom line was the jury ruled that they were innocent. They
Yes,
didn't do
I mean,
anything.
that poor pastor, I spoke to him multiple times over that period, and it was insane that they were prosecuting them.
So those are victories. Then I like the quiet victories, Laura. We had one right here in your hometown just recently.
Fredericksburg, Texas.
In Fredericksburg, Texas, where a teacher got in trouble because she showed the inauguration, and
During class.
some parents, during class, civics class, you know. So
and during her civics class.
some parents complained about that, and the principal took illegal action to discipline this teacher. And so within 24 hours, our legal team got involved, and 48 hours later it was resolved and everything was good. We believe in Matthew 18, even in this realm. If you can solve something, Matthew 18, for those that don't know, you try to go to the individual first and resolve it quietly.
Right.
If it doesn't work, then we kick in the media, we start touting the story. If that doesn't work, you bring in the lawyers. That's the system. This case, everything got settled quietly, and it was done. And so that, to me, are the best victories of all, because that's a testimony of who we are. This is not about saving America. This is about extending the kingdom of God. And how do we do that? A lot of people think you can't be firm and good at the same time, but you can. You can be, look at Christ. He was very compassionate, but he looked at the intent of people's heart. And when it was time to crack the whip, he cracked the whip and ran people out of the temple, and den of robbers, he called them. So you can do both, and that's what we try to be.
I heard a little rumor once that you work like 22 hours a day. Wait, I wonder where I heard that from, Bev. Any idea?
I don't know. Girlfriends talk, word gets around.
That may be the case, Mr. Maxwell. You might be
at times
putting in some hours.
If required, When you're on mission, you got to do what you got to do.
Yes.
But normally it's not 20.
You're doing better.
I'm doing better, but.
Well, doing better since you died.
Yeah.
Remember that part?
But, entrepreneurial world, you got to do what you got to do.
Yes.
So it's,
yes. Oh, sure. It's, you're fighting for survival, right?
Yeah. Make payroll. I got a company right now trying to make payroll on Friday, so.
Is that stressful?
24/7.
I tell people you just get used to it. It's part of the game. It's part of this. It's a sport. It's a challenge.
Yes.
It's a challenge.
It's a faith walk.
It's a faith walk.
It is.
Is that what it is, Beth?
A lot of it, I feel, is.
Was there a big change in 2020 for you?
My world, luckily I was not out in the workforce, and things like that. So, but 2020 changed the world, I feel. I feel that it.
Well, COVID and 2020 election.
COVID, 2020.
Yes.
I believe I had a paradigm shift in the way I see things. I was probably a little naive, and about things, and did not ever think that something like that could happen in our country, in the world. So I feel like it changed everyone and everything.
And you're a mom.
I'm a mom.
And
I'm
a grandmother.
Yes.
So you had all that to factor into it, right? So tell me what happened the night that Steve suddenly got sick.
Well, it was Veterans Day, this past Veterans Day, November 11th. It was a Sunday.
Yeah.
And we had gotten up and gone to church. And
early Veterans Day, early Monday mornings when all that happened. Right. Veterans Day was Monday.
Right. Well, the 10th, November 10th was a normal day. That was Sunday. We had gotten up, going to church, had a normal day. He was working from home, and November, the election had just happened, right? You know all the things that were going on during that, and the hurricanes. Do you remember the hurricanes that flew through
North Carolina and Florida?
Yep.
He was working very hard with a lot of wonderful people and a lot of wonderful pastors during hurricane relief and all kinds of things.
Trying to get help to people?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, our Remnant Alliance pastors, we have a lot of those, and from literally Venice, Florida, all the way up to North Carolina. So we were just rallying the troops and bringing in product, whatever they needed to help get them sustained.
All the pastors and churches within the alliance to help where they could.
Mm-hmm. And all of our people. And really, we had boots on the ground. We hooked up with a few other organizations, too, up in North Carolina especially, who hooked up with Elon Musk. They were getting Starlinks out. They had helicopters. We had mules, helicopters, everything getting.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was pretty intense.
So that was all going on. And he was working on some other things that I really, he has to talk about. But it was a lot of stress. There was a lot of pressure. The pressure was on. He was working 22-hour days. And it was just a lot going on. But we went to bed that night. Everything was okay. He has worked right up to about 11, and he was working on something pretty intense right up to bedtime. We laid down, and he was just tossing and turning. And I said, honey, what's the matter? And he said, I just can't get comfortable. He goes, I've got that feeling again. And he had been having some pressure in his shoulder and in his jaw. And we had been going to the doctor and having things checked out, had all kinds of tests run. Everything was coming back fine. Nothing was showing up. But this night was different, and something just prompted me, Laura. I could hear it in my head, get up, get up, get up. I jumped out of bed. I said, honey, why don't we get up and just get you moving around a little bit and see if we can get you to feeling better. And while you're at it, why don't you take an aspirin? I've never done that. Never. And let's take your blood pressure. I had to find the blood pressure cup. He doesn't have high blood pressure. He's never had high blood pressure. But let's just take your blood pressure and make sure everything's good. Well, I took it, and it was not good. And I took it again, and it was worse. And I took it again, and it was bad. And I said, get your shoes on. I'm dialing 911. And you know him. The miracle was he said, okay. He didn't argue with me,
that
right?
That in itself was
unusual, right? So
another miracle was the Friday before all this happened. We'd gone through a battery of tests. Friday we'd finished up all of our tests except for when they go in with the camera, and look. We were going to set that up. But on the way home we said, look, if this thing flares up again, it only flared up every other week or something.
He had hurt his elbow. So
and I hurt my elbow working out, and I thought maybe it was something to do with that. But so anyway, we made that decision on Friday that if it flares up, let's just get to the hospital and get this last test done. So that was timing perfect.
So I called the ambulance at like 12:15. So it was November 11th, Veterans Day, early in the morning. They got there about 12:30, came in. They were triaging him, hooking him up, EKG. Nothing showing up. So they said, well, we're going to go ahead and get checked out. Let's go on and take you in. Where do you want to go? And I'm just looking at him with a blank stare, I'm thinking, where do I want to go? I don't know. He said, why don't you go down to Advent Health in Sebring, Florida? They have a heart center down there. Well, I didn't even know that. And it was the closest hospital, too. It's just in the direction we don't normally go. We're normally going the other way.
So you weren't really familiar with it?
I wasn't that familiar with it, no. So I said, okay, let's go there. They said, now, Miss Maxwell, take your time, button up your house. We'll meet you down there. I said, okay. He gets up out of the chair, walks to the ambulance, down the stairs, crawls up on the gurney, kidding around with the EMTs, is this a comfortable gurney, the whole thing. Blows me a kiss.
Yes, it's first class gurney.
Yeah, right.
Just for you, Steve.
Yep.
Said, we'll see you when we get down there. I said, okay. And they shut the doors and off they went. So I came in, buttoned up my house, started trying to get a hold of the children and do all the things I needed to do, grab his wallet, get in the car, and I'm 15 minutes behind them. So I drive up to this hospital that I've never been to before, walk in, said, hi, I'm here. My brought my husband in to be checked out, and she says, "Ma'am, he's not in the system yet." Am I in the right place? I begin to panic. Am I in the right place? About that time, 2 of the EMTs that had just been at my house came walking around the corner. Except this time, they did not look the same. They looked like they had been through a war. They were disheveled and sweaty. One had blood on his shirt, and they just had that bead on me. And I'm trying to process, what am I seeing? What's going on right now? One knelt at my feet. One sat down beside me. And they said, "Miss Maxwell, we just need to let you know what happened before you go back there." I said, "He coded on the way to the hospital. He was gone for 17 minutes.
No heartbeat.
No heartbeat.
And coded means
Dead. You're gone." Yeah.
You died.
So he's been under CPR for over 35 minutes, but we got him back right before we got here, and that's all I heard. And they whisked me up and took me back into the ER, where I began to meet with the surgeons that were there. So
Did you see him at that point?
I did, Laura. I walked in, and I was the only one in the room, which was odd, right? Just he was there, and he was moving, and your husband Joe helped me understand what I was looking at, because we found out later that the EMTs had shocked him 7 times. So, it wasn't.
Protocol's 5.
It wasn't good.
They went beyond that.
But anyway,
What did he
5
look
epi
like?
shots.
I don't even know how to explain it. It was not real. He was moving, but it was not natural. He was there, but not there. And he looked like he had been beat up pretty much. But anyway.
So in the contrast from the man that you saw walk into the ambulance to that
right,
guy.
Exactly. It's like in a matter of 20 minutes, what am I looking at, right? And about that time, the little surgeon that was on duty, and I say little because of her stature. She was a small woman, beautiful.
It's not a Southern thing?
But she's a giant. Oh, no, oh my goodness. Well, she came in the room and literally grabbed my arms and pulled me into another room, and she began to triage me. She goes, "What is going on?" So I'm telling her, well, he had been having some discomfort, but we've been checked out, and his calcium number was 14.2. Mine was worse than his, all the things. And she's sitting there thinking, she goes, "Miss Maxwell," she goes, "I think this is a heart attack," because they were waffling between pulmonary embolism, heart attack. What is going on?
They weren't quite sure.
Right. And based on what I was telling them, that everything was checking out fine. She goes, "I think this is a heart attack." She goes, "But either way," she goes, "You see these numbers?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She goes, "His lactic acid was, his pH was 6.99. His lactic acid was 20. I didn't know what those numbers meant then. I do now. She goes, "Most doctors at this point are going to tell you there is nothing they can do." And I look over at the other surgeon, and he just was not, he was very closed. He wasn't making eye contact with me in his arms. And in his defense now, he's probably thinking the merciful thing to do is to do nothing, right? And
He doesn't want to make eye contact because he doesn't,
I'm looking for what he's saying, and he really didn't have much to say. And she pulled it back. She goes, "If you give me permission, I will try." She turned my face, and she goes, "Miss Maxwell, if you give me permission, I will try." I said, "Well, please try." And here's the cool thing. We were able to meet with her recently. The hospital wanted to do like a story about our story, because it's pretty miraculous the way he was healed from all of this, or came back from all of this. And she told me her point of view at that moment. She goes, "Yes, Miss Maxwell, I was talking to you, and I was trying to figure out what was going on." And she said, "And I prayed to God, what do I do here?" She said, "And I heard him say loud and clear, do what I trained you to do, and do it now." And that's when I grabbed your face and said, "If you give me permission, I'll try." So that piece of the puzzle came in, and
That's amazing.
It was amazing. She was a believer. And she gave God room, because hospitals get paid for good outcomes, right?
Sure.
There was nothing about this that predicted a good outcome,
No, in fact, it was just the opposite.
Just the opposite. But she gave God room and she tried.
Steve, do you remember any of this?
I don't remember any of that.
No. Wow.
No.
And so then what happened?
She was gone. Oof, gone. And I was in this room and I was alone. And I tell people when we get to share this story, and can I stop right here and thank you for allowing us to share this story? Steve and I said early on, we were going to be that one leper, that story of the lepers in the Bible, that one leper that comes back and says, thank you. Thank you, because we know God intervened and was merciful to us, and in a way that I can't even put into words. But at that moment, in that little room by myself, processing what has just happened, I say with you with all humility, I wasn't scared. I was mad. I was mad, Laura, because I knew, because of the things that he had been working on, because of the things,
yes,
you as well, the things y'all are doing, it's very disruptive to the kingdom of darkness. And my belief is also, John Eldridge is a teacher, mentor that I read and helped me put words to this, that we are dropped out of eternity into this love story set in war. We're at a war between two kingdoms. And we're just dropped in, and this is, our lives are playing out, and what does that all mean? And one of the reasons I know that this was a spiritual attack, I began to pray right then out loud, and I was raised Baptist. I'm not Pentecostal, didn't have a lot of background in that sort of thing, but somehow I instinctively knew at that moment that this was an attack on my husband, and that I needed to pray and contend for his life in a world that I could not even see or understand. And I began to do that. I began to pray out loud against what was happening. And one of the reasons that I was so sure about this is at that moment I began to understand that my children, two of my children, my grown children, my son first, 2 weeks before the heart attack, had a vision. He said, Mom, it wasn't a dream. He said, I was asleep and I woke up from a dead sleep. He said, and the room was full of smoke. He said, I couldn't see. He said, I jump up and I'm going through the house. I'm looking for the fire. He said, and the smoke began to dissipate. He goes, but Mama, I thought I was going to smell like smoke. And I didn't. I said, well, honey, I'm sorry. I'm glad it wasn't a fire. You have a good day, right?
Yeah, but it was that real that he literally thought
he was shook up, right?
Smoke.
A week later, my daughter had the exact same vision in a different house. Wow. She goes, Mom, I woke up. She goes, with a start. It's like someone had lit a torch under my nose. She goes, and I sit up and the room is full of smoke. She says, I cannot see my light across the room.
And she didn't know about her brother's vision?
She jumped up. She did. She knew that, but she had the very same thing happen. That's why she's a Christian counselor, and she has a network of friends and colleagues that she just kind of put the word out to some of those. And she said, listen, this is going on in our family. We don't know what to do with this. Is there anyone out there that can speak into this or has an opinion or help us with this? Mm-hmm. And sure enough, there was a woman who we have not even met yet that was in South Florida that got the word through, how God is. He just weaves that tapestry of people. And she prayed about it for about 12 hours.
Wow.
And she called Megan, and she goes, Megan, I do have a word for you. She goes, this is a message. It is from God. It is urgent. It concerns your family. Your family, y'all are about to go through a trial by fire, an all-consuming fire, but you are going to come through and you are not going to smell like smoke. Laura, I don't know how to explain to you how at that moment in that little ER room by myself, something fell on me, and I knew in my most inner being that no matter what this looked like, no matter what was about to happen, we were going to come through this and it was going to be okay. We just had to have believe that. We just had to believe that and walk through. So my children began to arrive. They looked at each other. They looked at me and they said, Mama, this is it. This is the fire. So at that moment, organically, we all in agreement began to pray every hour, on the hour, just believing that no matter what was coming down that pike at us, we were going to come through this and we were not going to smell like smoke.
So you, your son, your daughter?
My two daughters, and there were two really good friends of ours, lifelong friends that had gone and gotten my children that were there with us that night. And that little group, we started praying. And then every hour on the hour, everyone that would come to the hospital and people began to pray for us. The waiting room had 40, 50 people in it most of the time. Yeah. So
that's crazy.
And I am here to say thank you to every single person anywhere in this world, because prayer trains were going out everywhere that prayed for us, because it made, there's so many stories.
And God sent
such a difference.
Sent so many people at the right time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That only he could do it. Pastor she'd never met drove 2.5 hours to get down there. He was one of our Rim Alliance pastors, John Freed, and just a great man. But she can tell you that story. Charles came by. It's amazing in that realm how God just, when you need that one person to say something, they're there, and you know it's of God. Mm-hmm. John Freed was powerful. You got to tell that.
Yeah, well, the surgeon came back from the procedure, and she says, we were able to put a stent in. It was the Widowmaker heart attack. I don't know if any of you know about that, but it's a Widowmaker heart attack.
Which is what?
Most people don't survive it. What's the statistics?
12% survival rate.
Yeah.
12% survival rate. Wow.
The EMT saved his life. The surgeon saved his life. Going to this particular hospital saved his life. So many things that if one thing had been differently.
Like if he had had that at home with you in bed,
wouldn't matter. If we had gone to any other facility in our area,
would not have had facility.
Like the fire truck came out with the EMT. Well, the fire truck goes back to the fire station as I leave. Well, when I coded, they had to pull an ambulance over because they didn't have enough personnel to do everything that needed to be done. The fire truck turns around and comes back. And the captain on the fire truck says, I'm going with the ambulance, which is totally against protocol.
Wow.
And if it had not have been for that, that was the extra hand they needed to keep the oxygen flowing so it wouldn't bring it.
Yeah, they had an extra medic on duty that night, too. I mean,
all kind of little miracles.
So many crazy little things.
Yeah, so many things.
But Pastor Freed, this set the tone.
The surgeon came in and she goes, we got a stent in, but he's very sick. The next 12 hours are critical. You need to pray. I said, okay, so.
We got that covered.
So very early on, Pastor Freed came in. And he came into the room, and it was just he and I and Steve. And he prayed over Steve, and he anointed him with oil and put an anointing cloth on him, and very sweet time. And then he looked at me. And I had never met him. Remember, I did not know him. But he said, Bev, I want to remind you of the story in Mark chapter 5 of Jairus and his daughter, his 12-year-old daughter that had died. And the story is that Jesus is in a crowd with Jairus, who was the preacher of the town. He was the religious leader at the town. And they were trying to make their way to Jairus' house so Jesus could, pray over Jairus' daughter. Do you remember the story in the Bible where the woman with the issue of blood came up and touches Jesus' hem? People are trying, just clamoring to get to him. And Jesus said, who touched me? And they're saying, what do you mean, who touched you? You're in a crowd, right? Well, at that moment, right after that, the servant, Jairus' servant, runs up and says, don't bother coming, she's dead. And Jesus turned to Jairus, the preacher, and he said, do not be afraid. Only believe. Only believe. Let's go. They went to Jairus' house. Jesus got there. There were people standing outside. They were wailing. Bible says causing a commotion, carrying on. And Jesus says, why are you causing all this commotion? She's not dead. She's just asleep. And they laughed at him. Wow. And he didn't like it. And he cleared them out. He sent them all home. And he went in, took Jerry's, the father, the mother, a couple of disciples went in, grabbed the little girl's hand, said, "Get up, little girl." You know, she got up, danced around the room. He said, "Give her something to eat." And then he was off. He said, "Don't tell anybody, don't tell anybody." And then he was off to do other things. That pastor looked at me so kindly and he says, "Beverly," he said, "people who believe live like they believe." That means you get up, you eat, you drink. I never left the room hardly. I had a little pallet on the floor next to his bed. He says, "You lay down at peace. You lay down at night and you rest, knowing that God's got this. You present yourself well. You live like you believe." And I don't know, Laura, but it was as if I was already trying to do that, in my own way. But those words spoken were so perfect to me at that moment because it gave confirmation.
Yes.
That was like Jesus himself.
It's like a message.
Like a message. Just keep, only believe. Do not be afraid. Do not fear. Only believe. And that became our mantra.
Wow.
And I invited him out because we were praying every hour on the hour in agreement with everyone who was there. And the room was full most times, a lot of times. And I invited him to come out and pray that hour. And he did. And he walked out into the waiting room and he thanked everybody. He said, "The Maxwells are so glad you're here. We thank you for being here."
Wow.
He said, "But we're going to ask right now that if there's anybody here who does not believe, we're going to ask you to leave."
Did anybody leave?
No. He just waited. And then there was an exhale. He says, "We love you. Go downstairs, get yourself a Snickers bar, figure it out or not." He said, "It's okay. We love you."
Yeah.
But we in this circle right now are going to hold hands and pray in agreement and only speak life. It was as if a cool breeze blew through that room. I can't explain it.
Wow.
It changed everybody there.
The entire hospital. Staff.
It just blew
Staff
through.
as
It
well,
was amazing. And when we held hands and prayed that hour,
wow.
things.
Did you pray for the whole hour?
No, we just prayed at the top of every hour.
Yes.
Someone would lead us in prayer.
Wow.
And that was the day. That was probably one of the very worst days when he came. And the situation was such that Steve's liver had shut down. His kidneys had shut down.
Man.
He had been intubated in the field and had aspirated in the ER. So he had E. coli and staph in his lungs and in his blood. He had 105 fever. He was on a cooling blanket packed in ice. He had been still fighting even after all of this. Imagine that. He was still fighting everything, so they had to give him a paralytic. So he was completely paralyzed. He was
wow.
Right. And
wow.
That was the night my son was sitting in there with me and we were praying and we knew all of our friends and people around the world were praying every hour on the hour. And I watched the clock. And every hour on the hour, his fever would tick down and then tick down. And by morning,
yes,
when the sun came up, his fever had broken and it never returned.
That's amazing.
And that day, his liver functions began to improve. And his kidneys began to put output. Now, they were still in bad shape, right?
Yes.
He had to be on dialysis and all this sort of thing.
They were prepping us because in that situation, normally you lose the kidney. So you're going to need to have a kidney transplant down the road. Right?
Yeah. And I think he mentioned earlier that they have it's really cool, but they give you his medical chart on an iPad and you can follow along. The doctors come in. I was talking to all the doctors, but they would go back and write their reports. They weren't telling me. They would write it on the iPad. You can read it on the iPad. Well, I wouldn't read it because it didn't matter what it said, right? Mm-hmm. My oldest daughter is a nurse, so she was reading it.
Oh, boy, she was reading that frantically, right?
Yeah, she probably had the hardest faith walk because she knew too much, right?
Yes.
She knew too much.
Yes, very hard.
But I knew what they were thinking. clearly because they kept sending palliative care in to talk to me. Do you know what that is?
Oh, yeah. Palliative care is where you're
End of life. Yeah.
Yes, end of life. Just don't do anything. No medical intervention. Just let that person die.
Because they thought he was brain dead. You know, they thought because he had been gone for so long. And, you know, so they kept sending her in to talk to me. Sweet girl.
And at this point, he's not awake?
Oh, no. He was in a coma for a week. He was a paralytic.
7 days.
Yeah, and on a paralytic. Yeah, he was 7 days in a coma.
I mean,
but things just began to wake back up.
I remember getting the first notice of this, that it had happened, and just being in shock, you know, because, I don't know.
We had just seen you. It hadn't been long, yeah.
And you were not unhealthy.
No.
We didn't think, yeah.
You know, well, I mean, you certainly
it really wasn't. I mean,
certainly knew a lot of people that were a lot, you know. I mean, I'm not going to say you were the same shape as you were at 18, but you didn't.
He was working out.
Drink
he was
excessively. You didn't eat excessively. You were, you know, healthy and active, and I mean, and all I remember selfishly feeling was one shock, and then the other thing was just that. How can this be? Because, I don't know, the two of you, are such a force with everything that you are doing. And, you know, you're a glue that holds a lot of people and a lot of important things together. Not that many people fighting on the local level. Not that, you know, when you're that parent at the school board or whatever, there just aren't a lot of people there to support you, you know. And you were effective, and so I knew that your work wasn't done, you know? You were so far from done. And then you and I are both working on a bunch of things related to child trafficking, you know, kids that are in a bad situation. And there aren't that many people who are willing to jump in with both feet, you know. So a lot of people are very risk averse, and they're like, how's this going to affect my business and that kind of thing. And sometimes you look at them and you think, I don't know how to do you understand? Do you understand, like, everything you're holding on to is it's not going to exist. It's not going to matter. It's not going to exist if you've become a nation that is okay with children being sold and raped until they die. Just like, I don't know how to explain to you that these things that you think that you're risking, they're not even going to be here. But you're one of those people.
Well.
You're one of those people that understands.
You and
that.
I both struggle with people who are not willing to take a stand, you know, and say we can't allow this to happen.
And many of them, you know, are very grateful to you or to me or people like you, Bev, you know, but I'm still left wondering, why is it our job? Why do you not have any responsibility? I had a woman say to me once, you know, I don't like conflict and I like to spend my weekends with my kids. And I'm like, I love spending my weekends with my kids. Like, that would be awesome. I'd love to be able to actually have a weekend where I'm not working. Like, wouldn't that be great? And I'm looking at her thinking, and I just looked at her and I said, why do I have to risk everything all the time, over and over again? But you don't have to risk anything. Why have I have a really good friend who said, never complain about the results of work you didn't do. Right? And that's what I wanted to say to her. Okay. She's just waiting for the next election, asking me, who do you think is going to be the candidate in the next election? I'm like, lady, we'll be lucky to make it to the next election. You know what I mean? It's like, is the next election going to be stolen? Are they going to fix vote fraud? Are they going to find out what really happened in 2020 and hold people accountable? And there's so, you know, I understand that these are considerations that you have, but there's so many urgent things right in front of us. Like, our children are growing up without any sense of what it means to be a man or a woman. They're growing up afraid of relationships, afraid of parenting because they don't really know, you know, afraid of their own instincts. You know, guys that have sort of typical masculine instincts feel guilty for that because we've just, you know, because we're under attack.
I think it's realizing it. And I think a lot of it is just human nature. People do not want to get into conflict because it's self-preservation, right?
Yeah.
A great book I read one time, I forget the author, but it's called True Believers. And it's a study the guy did on all mass movements in the history of the world, good and bad.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a common theme. It's a small minority that takes on the crusade to do whatever they're going to do. And most people will not follow, will not get engaged until they see that minority begins to become the majority or the power shifts there. Then the majority of the people will begin shifting toward the power. Why?
Yeah.
Not because they're going to get involved, because it's self-preservation.
It's in our DNA.
It's a natural
built for
thing,
survival.
right? It's a survival thing, right? But
the crazy part now, Steve, though, is that you think most people are one way or another way, but it's not true.
No. I think too, for the believer, I can understand a non-believer, but for a Christian, we have God's word. We've been commanded to do certain things. C.S. Lewis, I think, said it best, where he said, that God, when he can, delegates. And without God, we cannot. But without man, if man can be a part of it, he will not. So we have a responsibility not to go win the battle, but to engage and have the attitude that we're going to get engaged with God.
Yes.
God wins the battle. And you look at those Bible stories and they just come alive. That's what Daniel did. It come down to, I'm going to obey my king or I'm going to obey the earthly king. And so they said, you can't pray anymore. He said, watch me. And so you can go to a lion's den if you do it. Okay, send me. You see the power in that?
And they did.
Because my loyalty is with my creator, not with the government, not with any institution. And you look at Esther, look at Rahab. That's what she did. Rahab was a, questionable career path, but she's in the Faith Hall of Fame. Why? Why? Because she's willing to lay her life, risk her life to help those spies. In the Bible, God said, that's faith. I'm going to reward that. And there's coming a day where a lot of people, God's going to say, depart from me. I never knew you. You played the game, but I never knew you. So it's a very, very interesting concept to think about when you look at people that do what you do and put yourself at risk. It's a true act of faith.
And there are, and I am happy to say I'm encouraged, and inspired myself. Because there are people like yourselves out there. Yeah. And you're not alone, and I'm not alone. There's moms going to school boards.
People, Lara, right? You know more than most about this, but I tell people when we speak to crowds of people or small groups anyway, but if you knew the good people out there behind the scenes and what they were doing, you would be so encouraged.
Yeah.
Even election night, there was so much good going on behind the scenes that nobody will never know on this side of heaven. But there's a lot of great people out there.
There really are a lot of great people.
Thank God.
It's funny because we're raised with this concept, I think, of the masses, being the great unwashed, right? You don't want to be around people and, people are so this and people are so that. And really, when you look at that years later, you realize, wow, that was sort of instilling in us a dislike of humanity. That's how that elitist mindset begins to set in. Cause it's like, you don't want to be, with that crowd. And it's really weird because actually what I found time and time again is that, people constantly surprise you. Sure, there's a lot of bad out there, but people constantly surprise you with how good they can be. It humbles me all the time because I meet great people. Sometimes you just meet someone who's the best mom you've ever seen, and you're like, wow, how do you do that? Like, that's
and
crazy.
Jesus is probably our best example, right? He didn't hang out with the church group that much. He hung out with the guys like me, the Zacchaeuses and the Matthews, the tax collectors and the sinners. He was accused of hanging out with sinners. And I think that's one of the issues and challenges for our church today is getting outside the four walls and being that light in that community. And that's one of the things I love about Citizens Defending Freedom, because we tell our folks it's not about going to the school board meeting or having the lawyers there to support the citizen. In the process, we are witnesses, right? We witness and we look for the one hurting And we have a lot of people, a lot of stories where people have actually come to Christ and in the process of us doing what we do. And that's what it's all about. It's all about the kingdom. There's two kingdoms at war. What we are supposedly with God's kingdom, and what's he challenged us to do? Go ye therefore and teach all nations, right? To go the Great Commission. And then also in the prayer from the Lord, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. How does that look? What does that look like?
Yes. What does his will look like?
That's us. That's us working with him, right? So,
well, and I think in our culture, with the internet and all it can be toxic. There's so many good things about it, but I don't believe our hearts sometimes were meant to hold all the things that come at us. I don't know how you do what you do, because you're actively, as a journalist, going out there and seeking, thank God for you, seeking truth and finding answers. But in that takes a toll on you. It has to, because of the things that you see and you come across, where I can kind of shield myself. That's not my calling. God has gifted you, Lara, to do this, and you're the best I've ever seen. But we have to stay aligned with God. And it sounds so simple and so trite, but it's just shelter in his love. There's so many things that come at us every day that we could be so offended by, which can make us angry. And I see these talking people on TV that are great people, some of them, but they're angry. And anger is a portal to hell. Anger opens you up for things like hate and malice and all that you never wanted to let come in, Wow. And we're all broken. It's not a sin to be broken, right? But we all have pride and we all have egos sometimes, and those things feed in. It's just so important that you take the time to ground your heart, to take care of yourself, to shelter yourself, in God's word, know God's word, and understand that this is an epic love story being played out. Where do you fit in? Because you can't save the world by ourselves, right? But we can be used in our own little areas of the universe and the world and the culture to do what we were called to do. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I wonder did you feel loved in that moment, when you're in the hospital and you're praying for your husband?
Let me tell you, this was the worst thing, right, that could ever happen. I wouldn't trade what I felt going through this for $1 million. I felt like I was standing in a fire, a literal fire, inferno, and I was completely insulated. I have never felt such love from my Heavenly Father. I have never felt such peace.
It's amazing.
Even before he woke up from the coma, I experienced joy in my heart because I was just believing. I knew, and I can't explain it, but I knew that this was going to be okay. And I was going to be able to tell this story to the glory of God. I knew it.
But not everyone around you shared that feeling, right? I mean, wasn't the hospital send him palliative care?
Yeah, they were sending palliative care, but they were so good. They were a faith-based hospital, and they were not speaking because we had put the word out. We're not, don't speak any negative. We're only speking
don't
life
talk
here.
About
they were very
anything.
truthful. She was sweet. She came in. And she kept coming in. I just wouldn't talk to her, So I'm just not. I said, we'll go have coffee. We can visit, but I'm not going to talk to you about this. And she came in towards the first week there while he was still in a coma. I think it was on a Thursday, actually. And she goes, Bev, I'm going home for the weekend. I'll be back on Monday. When I get back on Monday, you and I are going to have a conversation. I said, okay. Come back on Monday, and I'm going to introduce you to my husband because he's going to be awake. And she compassionately smiled and hugged my neck and said, okay, I'll see you on Monday.
Wow.
He opened his eyes on Saturday. There's a whole story behind that. He woke up on Sunday, and he went through all the rigors of, breathing so they could take the tube out on Monday, the breathing tube out. And she was there to see it.
Wow.
And she was wrecked in the best sort of way. Yeah. But even up until Saturday, that story is my oldest daughter, who is the nurse, for a moment was in the room by herself with her daddy. And because she knew that this is the day. If something doesn't happen today, right? So she was in there praying for him, talking to him, fussing at him.
Because the longer you're on the machines and in the coma, the medics.
Well, they thought he was brain dead. They didn't think there was anything there. And the doctor came in, and Mallory and I were standing there across from Steve's bed, and the doctor just looked at him. He said, and he had broken ribs. He had all kinds of stuff because of the CPR.
Yes.
And they would come up and do this to try to get a reaction out of him. He wouldn't move. And he just looked at me and he said, I think I'm going to order another CT scan of his brain. And I said, okay. Are you expecting, you've already done one and it was fine. Are you expecting anything to be different? He goes, no, other than the fact that he's just not waking up because he was on no sedation. There was no reason why he shouldn't be.
So it wasn't a medically induced coma?
Not at this point. Not at the end of not by
after the surgery, yeah.
They had given him a few days. They had pulled everything off.
Wow, and he still didn't wake up?
He still wasn't waking up. So Mallory and I were standing, the doctor left.
You were having the sleep of your life.
Exactly.
Those 22-hour days.
Oh, I was
People like, I'm going to make the most of this.
So Mal and I were standing there and we were just talking, and I look up and his eyes are open. And they looked horrible because they were bloodshot and, when your kidneys aren't working, they were orange, just like that. And I was trying to, are his eyes open? I said, Mallory, his eyes are open. And so I started talking to her. I said, honey, if you can hear me, I said, you're in the hospital. You're going to be okay, but we need you to respond to us. They need you to respond. I said, so if you can hear me, I need you to blink your eyes. And he blinked his eyes. And I looked at Mal. I said, go get the doctor. So she ran out. So I'm talking to him. I'm telling him where he's at and what's going on. And he's just blind. His eyes are open, but that's all.
Just blank.
But I asked him again. I said, honey, can you blink one more time for me? And he did it again. So I knew.
Because at that point, you've got that kind of pressure, right?
Oh.
I know what it is like. My mom was in hospital for a year before she died.
You hear the top.
You hear the talk. You could see the way they don't quite want to make eye contact.
Yeah.
They're kind of very nice to you.
Yeah.
Just a little bit too nice because they don't really want you to know that it doesn't look good. It's that kind of thing, right?
So the doctor comes rushing in and but right before the doctor got there, that was all he had. He just closed his eyes. But I know that he heard that conversation and he was trying to let me know that, hey, I'm here. I'm here, but that was all he had. So that was on Saturday. Sunday rolls around and early Sunday morning, wee hours, sun hadn't up yet. I'm on the floor and I hear this noise and I look up and he's moving his legs. And he's kind of moving his head. And I'm thinking, he's moving. So the nurse, again, like you say, very cautious.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a good sign, Miss Maxwell. This is a good sign. I said, no, he's waking up. And, they were like, yeah, it's going to be okay. But sure enough, Sunday, he woke up and I was right in his face. And I was talking. And when he opened his eyes, I could tell he recognized me. He was there. It's the first time he was there, and I knew it was going to be okay.
So really, that was Monday, Veterans Day, the heart attack happened.
Early. So like 1 week later, he woke up. Like exactly 1 week.
Boy, that's incredible. And do you remember that moment?
I remember the moment I woke up. I remember, I hadn't, I was with the Lord a lot of this time. I don't know how long. But I remember waking up and seeing her right here, and I could not figure out, where am I? There's my wife, but what am I doing here? So she began telling me what had happened, and it just took I slowly come out of it. I was paralyzed. I could not figure out why I couldn't move.
He was coming out of the pit, but he had been laying there for weeks, so he was
trying to move.
Couldn't move.
Can I move?
Is that a strange feeling?
Yeah, and
horrible.
And then, you see your kids. You start seeing, and she starts talking to me, and I began to. I didn't really absorb it till like 3 or 4 days later. I awaken, and I'm ready to get out of there now, because I'm in a coma for 7 days, and then 7 days later I get discharged. I mean, all this stuff came back to life, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But so I'm getting fidgety, and she's finally one day says, "Let me tell you, when everybody leaves tonight, I'm going to read you a bedtime story," because I couldn't figure out, why am I going to kidney dialysis? Why am I doing all this stuff? I had a heart issue. And that's when she actually read the doctor reports on the iPad, and it dawned on me that day, in a big way, that, oh my gosh, I'm not supposed to even be here. This was real. I died. So that's...
He died for 17 minutes.
Yeah.
That's what they were worried about, brain damage.
Yeah, sure.
Because your brain didn't have oxygen for that long.
Well, we were at CPR, so, but normally, yeah. That to your point, to the point that you were making earlier, that's why I feel that this was like more than just physical. This had a spiritual element to this attack because of how quickly it came on and how quickly he recovered. Oh,
the recovery was unbelievable. I remember getting these detailed updates on, and at first it was like, oh my word! Like he's actually. It doesn't look like he's actually going to recover.
We're not going to make
it. And I was talking to your partner, and his wife was amazing.
Yeah, Nancy.
She's wonderful. Nancy is wonderful, and she was giving me detailed updates, and I was getting updates from other people, but it was kind of like.
Yeah, John, my partner, was there. He was there that whole time.
That's what Nancy was saying.
Yeah.
And so, and I just, it was painful, and so I just wanted to kind of focus on that. I couldn't absorb too much else, and also I think then you started to put a couple updates.
My daughter, Megan was putting out every hour on Instagram, and Mallory was putting out a daily.
That was the one I was reading, was the daily one.
Every day, what was happening, what had happened,
and then other people were sending those to me, But I kind of stuck with Nancy because I was just like, wow. And then we were all praying. And then it was, then you you woke up, and then I was like, is that a picture of Steve in a wheelchair leaving the hospital? What just happened?
He had this heart attack, gone for 17 minutes. A week later, he woke up
from a coma,
woke up. And the first thing he asked me, they took the tube out. Because still, we're wondering, is he still really are we okay? Right?
Yes.
He opens his eye, he's like, what happened? So I told him what happened. And then he said, he was asking for a Coke, and I couldn't understand what he was saying. I said, what do you want?
My throat was all dry.
He said, I want a Coke. I said, and then he spelled it. I want a COKE. And my daughter said, he's fine, Mom. He couldn't spell before this happens. But the reason I knew that was a good sign is because whenever we have a cold or drink, you want that carbonation. That's what he would want. That's what he would want is a Coke.
And he had that tube.
Yeah.
Tube down your throat. Horrible.
So I thought, and then he asked, did they get the girls? And that was the other.
So that night, we'd been working on hurricane relief, but the last thing I was working on, I got a call from one of our friends, and they were putting boots on the ground to rescue some girls that were caught in human trafficking. So he asked if I could help him out with that. Help me out meaning make a few phone calls to get some resources that we needed. And so that was the last thing I was working on that night. And it's interesting because this is what the first thing the Lord showed me when I died. So anyway, we were working on that. So when I left in the ambulance, the last thing I remember was we have a long driveway with a cattle guard at the end. So you hear it when you go across with your tires, And so the ambulance went across the cattle guard. They turned left, and we're going to the Sebring Hospital. And the next thing I know, I'm coming out of the gurney. I'm floating out of the ambulance. We live in a small town of about 3,000 people. I'm looking at the city in outer space, not in outer space, I'm local space, but I'm heading into outer space. The stars and the beauty. I first didn't know really what was happening, but it was totally peaceful, total love, total quiet almost.
No pain.
Oh, no pain. No pain. No pain at all. I mean, I'm out of the body. It's like you're free,
We're getting new ones one day.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but as I'm floating toward this massive universe, all of a sudden, Jesus himself becomes coming to me. And I'm looking up to my left. He comes to my, and he puts his arm around me, right? He's standing right here. And he said, and in that realm, you don't say words. It's almost like if you and I can read your thoughts, you can read my thoughts, but it's more powerful than words.
It's real communication.
Because you absorb the communication, it's your entire being. But what was said to me was, I want to show you what's happening in the spiritual realm. And so the next scene is all of a sudden now as high as you can see. Imagine being in outer space, high as you can see, high, low, left and right are these, I call them flat screen TVs, but really it was like holograms. It was like millions of scenes happening on Earth simultaneously. And then this one scene to my left where he came into close focus, and it was a scene of these girls that are trapped.
Wow.
And there were 3 points of light that came into that scene, and the darkness fled, and those girls were liberated. And what Jesus said to me, he said, Steve, I see everything. I see everything. He said, and when you join me, we work together. We work together. And when the light comes into that scene, the darkness must flee. Laura, the next thing, he began talking to me about God's glory, the glory of his Father, and how holy he is, and how we cannot look upon God because of his holiness. If we did, we would die. Moses wanted to see God's holiness, and God said, no, you can't. I can show you my goodness, not my holiness. And so, again, and this is found, after all this is all over, I get back home, I get my Bible, and I started studying all this stuff, and I found the scriptures to back all this up. But in Hebrews chapter 1, the Bible tells us that Jesus is the radiance of God's glory. So when we receive him, God's glory comes into us because he who knew no sin became sin on our behalf. He paid the price for our sins. So now there's a connection back to God. So every point of light that you see out there, every good deed that's being done, it's God with us. Like I shared a while ago, just like the C.S. Lewis comment. It's God with us. And so it was so refreshing to see that God sees everything. Jesus sees everything. There's no one that's left alone. And this light that we receive when we receive Christ, we are in a battle with him. And he does the hard work. We just are obedient. And when I say he gave me a dissertation on light, he talked about light. I traveled into a DNA strand to show me even the energy in a DNA strand comes from God. Everything, yes.
You did all of this?
I felt like a PhD in light when I got home. It was just as incredible.
He came home, he did it was
quantum physics and all this stuff.
He's trying to remember what he was showed. It was shown. It was interesting. Things he did not know before. He's here it is, right here.
And it was just so powerful and so encouraging. But the next scene was the most encouraging of it all, because we went from there to that scene with all these scenes everywhere, and all of a sudden we're fast forward, all this light coming through, and we come to a slow grind, to a stop, and it's the entrance into heaven. It's the scene of heaven, and it's huge, beautiful city in heaven. And what Jesus showed me was the saints that have gone on before us. Saw my grandmother. Millions millions of people who've gone before us. And they were all busy. They were all had a project they were working on.
What were they like?
I couldn't tell. They just, you just, again, you can't talk. So you just sense this stuff. But they were going here and one was going there and this one was doing this. And they all had their assignments and they were all smiling at me and happy and joyous. There was no old people there. It was like my grandmother was young. She was back in her prime. But they had assignments, but the main thing God was showing me, Jesus was showing me, was they were encouraging me. And he just said, keep going, keep going, keep going. And the Bible talks about we have a cloud of witnesses that watch what we do. And these are people who've left, they've lived their lives on this earth, and they've gone back there. And now it's our turn. And one day we'll be there, and there'll be others on the earth. And the sense was, this is a story, as Bev talked about. This is a love story. It's a story that we've been cast into. Many generations before us have been here. Generations of Jesus tarries is coming in the future. Many generations. It's the middle of the story, but it was encouragement. Encouragement. Don't grow weary. Keep going. Keep going. And then next he began speaking to me, and he said, Steve, I am about to unveil all corruption and all evil on the earth. And I'm calling the nations to the valley of Jehoshaphat, which is found in Joel chapter 3. I'm calling the nations to the valley of Jehoshaphat, where they're going to have to make a decision. It's the valley of decisions, what Jehoshaphat means. They're going to decide to be with me, or they're going to reject me. And those that reject me, I will be dealing with. But those that receive me, I'm about to fill the portals of heaven with those people. And the final harvest has begun. And then he said, I want you to go back and tell all your friends what you've experienced here.
And you remember this with absolute clarity.
Absolute clarity. The time I woke up, but I tell you. Matter of fact, about 3 or 4 days after I woke up, hospitals are really cold, as you know, they're cold. And so I could never get warm. And so when everybody left, I told Bev, get in bed with me, and I need some warmth.
I need your body.
We were in there together one night, and all of a sudden, many of those saints right there in the ceiling were in my room. And they were, again, encouraging me. And I kept, Bev, do you see him? Do you see him?
He was on no medication.
Oh, no.
We were out of intensive care.
Right here.
So there's some funny stuff off camera. I'm going to have to tell you some of the funny stuff he said in intensive care. I was writing it down. But this was, had been moved up or down, however you want to say it, in a hospital to a different, like, critical care.
Yes.
And so he was completely lucid. He was just like he is right now this night.
Amazing.
Yeah. He said, Bev, do you see that?
Mm.
And I said, I said, no, honey, I don't. He said, what are you looking at? He said, you don't see all those people? I said, no, I don't see them. I said, but I believe you do. And I think it's just a veil. It's just a dimensional veil. But he could see them plain as day.
They were, again, encouraging. Go, go, go. So, the message I take home, I studied this a long time. We had a lot of other things that happened. And she had a second cousin that's unbelievable. We haven't seen in 20 years. And God gave her a vision of what happened that night. But the takeaway is, number one, do not fear death. Number two, you're here on a mission. Fulfill your mission. Number three, God is here to help. Receive his son, and he joins with you on this mission on earth. Number four, we're in a spiritual battle. We all know that. And join the right side and go to work. Be encouraged.
Be encouraged.
You have people that are rooting for you, and there's nothing to fear. And Jesus is going to return one day. And so that was the full package of what I was shown. And
it's amazing.
And that's one of the first things, when I woke up was, did they get the girls? And
did they?
We finally made contact with that individual, and they did. They were able to rescue those girls. I believe it probably happened when he was showing me it happened.
Oh, yeah, that may be.
That was the first scene that he showed me.
Wow.
So
that is quite something.
Isn't that great? So
that is quite something.
Never feared death, but I definitely don't fear it now. It's not really death. You just walk into this dimension, into a new dimension. He's right there waiting for you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting. And what did they say to you medically about being gone for 17 minutes?
That got kind of funny because,
I'll tell you a funny story.
Yeah, he can tell you this.
So
yeah,
the whole hospital was just blown away. General Flynn came to see me, and a lot of people came to see me while I was in the hospital, and even the security guards are going, "Who is this guy?" We never had anything happen. But I believe the spirit, General Flynn, he is a good guy. I think he talked. I was out, but you said he talked pretty tough to me, didn't he? Huh?
He told him to get up and stop acting out. He was in a coma. You need to get up. We got work to do, boy.
Yeah.
That is too funny. Well, yeah, I'm sorry to say it, but I mean, that was really, apart from the personal pain, obviously, especially for you and your daughters and your son and everyone, because you are very loved. It was just sort of this feeling is like, what?
Yeah.
Like, we're not done.
We
don't have a lot like you.
We had so many people praying, but this one story kind of tells you, ask about the hospital, the staff and all. First of all, so supportive. They just did a documentary on it. I mean, it was so powerful even to them, what God did in that situation. But there was this woman who's close to retirement. She told me she should have retired already, but she did the kidney dialysis in the hospital. So I had, the last thing to come back was the kidneys, right? So once I left the hospital, they had like 3 or 4 months worth of kidney dialysis 3 times a week. They had to go through until they could find either the kidneys would come back or they had to find a kidney transplant. So anyway, the last day I was in the hospital, this lady, precious saint, she comes up to me and she goes, "I just want to tell you something. I know you're leaving here today, but this is so comical because you see these numbers right here. They cannot figure out how you're alive. You're not supposed to be here. And I've been in meetings where they're arguing on how to write this up, but it's a miracle." So that's kind of the idea behind the scenes. It was like, man, this is great, but how do we write this down? The magnitude of it was that big.
He woke up a week later. He was discharged from the hospital a week later. 2 weeks after the heart attack, they discharged him.
Yeah.
We weren't able to get out of the hospital for a couple of days after that, though, because he was supposed to have to go to protocol for his situation is he's going to have to go to rehab. He's going to have to be in rehab for weeks. And Steve says, "Why do I have to go to rehab? I'm fine." And they said, "Well, I don't know. We'll test you." So they sent 2 big guys up, tested him. He went up and down 2 flights of stairs and they said, "Dude,
on one leg.
You don't need rehab. That would be the worst thing we could do. So we're just going to send you home with outpatient dialysis." So they had to work through unwind and rewind, all of that stuff. Long story short. So he was sent home with, like you said, a script for a couple of months of outpatient kidney dialysis. We went to 4 outpatient kidney dialysis. And the doctor said, shaking his head, he said, "You're done. You're done.
Kidneys are healed.
Your kidneys are fine."
So we left the hospital.
That was 3 weeks.
Yeah. The heart.
That is just incredible.
Yeah. When I left the hospital that day, they did what do you call that?
Echocardiogram.
Echocardiogram, but the heart was back to 100%
normal function.
When you left the hospital.
Kidneys came back.
You went from such a massive widowmaker heart attack, death, to normal function in
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And off of dialysis in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So from start to finish, it was a 3-week healing.
I'll tell
he
you
was
this.
supernaturally healed.
Yeah.
I mean, they're
and I attribute that to Jesus, our Lord, and I attribute that to the prayers of the saints.
Prayers.
I'll tell you why. This is an interesting story because, again, we're Southern Baptists, so we're not into this vision thing and all that. We're kind of
now. I'm a Baptist-costal now. I tell everybody.
A Baptist-costal. It's a new thing.
That's right.
Just ask Bab. Got any questions? Call Bab.
She has a second cousin who we have not seen in decades, just a distant cousin, but a saint. A prayer warrior.
She's a prayer warrior.
And she got word the night all this happened. God woke her up at 3 a.m. and told her to start praying for me by name. She hadn't seen me in 20 years. So she begins praying, and God gives her a vision of me in the hospital room hooked up to all these. I had 17 bags hooked to me at one time. And Satan actually had come, and I hesitate to say this because it sounds like I'm some kind of important person. I'm not an important person. Why this happened to me, I don't know. But Satan had asked for me and sent his lieutenants. But God, she said, sent Gabriel. Beth said that's too high ranking. But there was an angel in my room.
It's not my vision.
That literally 15 foot tall. She said his wings covered my entire body and held back the demonic forces. And then 3 or 4 days later, she said,
the angel said, go tell his family he's going to be okay.
Go tell his family's going to be okay.
And pray.
So she gets a hold of my mom, gets a hold of my sister-in-law, my brother, and
she actually gets hold of you. That's incredible too.
Yeah. And so 3 or 4 days later, she goes back, wakes up again. The enemies come after me again. There's no angel in the room, but there's like a shield over the room. And the demonic forces could not penetrate that shield. And what that shield were the prayers of the saints. And how I know that is, again, talking to my quiet time after I got home, I'm asking God all kind of questions, But he said, Steve, when I sent my angel to protect you at first until the word got out. Once the word got out, though, the prayers of the saints are sufficient to hold back the enemy. So I tell your audience, prayer matters. It's real.
Yes.
That connection with God is real. The fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much, the Bible says. Don't give up on your prayers. And faith, family, and friends is what it all boils down to. Because we had just an incredible family. Our children did a great job. Our friends came in, and then our faith. We had so much going for us, and we're just humbled by it.
What you're saying reminds me of the story of a person who was in a car wreck and died, and described seeing, for those who were praying.
Yes.
Seeing. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do remember that.
I don't remember who it was.
I heard it was a near-death experience. I listened to one time where, he had died, and he saw these 6 or 7 beams of light going into heaven.
Which were the prayers.
With the prayers of his family around his bed.
Yes, and he said he wanted people to know that he physically, in the other dimension, saw the prayers. Right. And you could see them coming up to the heavens from the earth and from the cars where people were praying, and not from the cars where they weren't praying.
That's right. Yeah.
What are you doing?
Isn't that amazing?
What are you doing?
Yeah.
That is amazing. I know it's real.
Prayer rarely is real. And there's so many prayer warriors out there. I know there's a lot of people that pray for me, and I just want to say thank you to them. I know you pray for me. I pray for you and you. I feel like your prayers are extra strong. No. And Bev's got extra strength. It's like,
I've been very blessed.
Like you get Theraflu, extra strength, maximum
that little
strength.
Girl in that
Bev's got maximum strength prayers.
I had no idea when I saw that little girl, that ponytail in 2nd grade, but it was awesome.
When you were leaning out of the
I cleaned out of the car. Hey, girl.
That's too
funny. Known, right?
So is it sometimes people go through these things and they're moved and everything else, but then they kind of go back to normal. I feel like with you two, you didn't go back to normal.
Here we go. That's true love right there.
That's true love right there. No, this has forever changed me in a sense that I don't know how to put it to words. It's like everything kind of went from black and white to color. A lot of the things that I knew, I now know on a different level. Mm-hmm. Like when I go into Publix, or for you, it would be HEB, and you bump into a person or you have an encounter with someone, that is a divine appointment. And there is meaning in everything. And the words we say to one another are so powerful. They're so strong. And they last for eternity. They will go on into eternity. And the thing, Steve and I were talking not long after this happened, and I heard that voice in my head say, stop asking why. Because you're like, why? What? Because I know people that have had this happen to them and they didn't make it.
Yes.
So you ask yourself, Lord, thank you. Why? And he said, stop asking me why, Bev.
It's the wrong question.
It's the wrong question. That's exactly what he said. That's the wrong question. Ask me what? What am I doing? What do you want me to do? And all we know to do right now is share our testimony, as Steve mentioned earlier in the book of Revelation, where it says that's how you defeat evil, by the blood of the Lamb. That's been done by the word of our testimony, and by having courage to give the testimony. Mm-hmm. So I just want to share with everyone and say thank you for your prayers and how important it is to pray. When someone comes to me now and says, will you pray for me? Oh, sister, that's a whole different thing than it was before this now.
Yes.
It's a whole different thing for me.
Yes. And
shamefully, I'm in a way, I'm sorry to say that, but I'm so grateful that I've had this paradigm shift.
Power now. Sometimes, when you pray and it's words and going into the ether, it can feel like that. And especially if your prayers are not answered, that's hard. Mm-hmm. It's hard for people to keep their faith and to understand. Of course, it's God's timing, but having that trust and having that faith can be very hard. I mean, I think about kids who are raped over and over again for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I've interviewed girls. One was raped when she was 12. I interviewed her, I think she was like 19.
Yeah.
Another one, she was 13 and she was 22 when I interviewed her, and she was still being raped. So you're talking about, a living hell, right?
Yeah.
You went through a terrible experience, but it was in relative terms, it was brief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very brief.
I went through a terrible experience being gang raped, but in relative terms, that was brief. Too,
not a decade, not a
right. I meet these people and kids that are rescued sometimes, and young women, young men, right, and that they've been through this over and over and over and over again.
Yeah,
it's
interesting too, because this past week we spoke at a small function there in our hometown and gave our testimony like we're doing here. And this woman comes after me afterward and she says, thank you for sharing. I was one of those abused girls. And I pray every night, Lord, please send good people to rescue girls. Because she had been rescued, but she had gone through a long time of it. And she was in tears. Mm-hmm. You gave me hope because you share with me there are people out there that are doing that are rescuing girls. I said, oh yeah, there's a ton of organizations out there that are helping. It's an evil thing. But anyway, I think sharing, it helps so many people. And to me, the testimony of our story is Bev's side more than my side. I was with the coach. But her side, the reality of the seriousness of that, and then the rallying of family and friends and faith and seeing how God was working with her just to let her know, I'm with you and this is going to be okay, To me, that's so powerful because we all live in the earth. Very few of us get a chance to go meet the Lord and come back. But everybody lives every day and goes through crisis every day. We have a great God. We live in a broken world. Miracles. It truly is a love story. It's a love story where God has redeemed us.
What do you say, though, to people who don't believe in God? Or who there's many Christians out there who, don't feel connected to God or their faith, or
those are two different
don't believe anymore.
The folks that don't believe in God, I just want to encourage them to reconsider. There are no atheists in heaven or hell. Atheists only exist on earth. Okay? As soon as you leave this body, you're going to realize you were wrong. And just take a step back and look. Look at the goodness. Look at this war between good and evil. Even a person who doesn't believe in God has a sense of good and evil. Where did that come from? Where does the conscience come from? Well, I don't believe in God. I'm just dying and you're done. Really? Well, where does the thinking conscious go? If the body's no longer alive, it goes somewhere. It just vaporized. No. Just reconsider. For those that are Christians or maybe they've lost their first love, I just, again, ask them to get on their knees and ask God to reveal himself to them.
Restore their love. He's
ready. There is no judgment. Okay, we get this confused between judgment. He says, don't judge others. And God's word is the standard. It does all the judging. we don't judge anybody because all of us have messed up. We're all messed up in one way, shape, or form. We're all fallen. But he's the only one that puts it together. And I just look at all the other faiths in the world. I love to share this with people. You know, of all the faiths in the world, what makes Christianity so unique? And what makes it unique is that every other religion on earth is man trying to reach God, trying to work his way to God. Christianity says, you can't get to me, but I'll come to you. I'll come to you. I'll send my son. And the barrier is sin. What do you do with sin? We've all sinned. What do you do with it? God can't see sin. He can't approach a person with sin. So what do we do with that? Well, Jesus, became sin on our behalf. He swapped with us, right? And we put on his righteousness, a simple childlike faith. So God reaches down in the Christian faith and says, I'm going to fix it for you because you can't fix it, right? In the Old Testament, the Ten Commandments are really a standard to let us know we need help because none of us can meet that, you know? And that's where the whole gospel comes in. Jesus says, I have fulfilled the law. Just trust me, and it's just as if you trust you're perfect. It's powerful. And I got to meet him and see it and got a lecture on it.
What did he look like?
I'm sorry?
What did he look like?
I didn't get to see his face, but I got to feel his presence, but I saw his body, and his face was right here. So I didn't get to see him head on. Mm-hmm. But it was a glowing robe. The hand was on this side of my shoulder. It was a white robe. I thought it was an angel. No, it was the Lord himself. You just had the confidence of it's him. And how he called my name. He knew me, my name. Steve, I want to show you what's going on in the spiritual realm. And it was from that scene that I was just working on a few minutes before. That's the scene he showed me. I've got this. It's going to be okay. Just keep doing what you're doing.
And those girls were okay. That's kind of incredible. Mm-hmm. Well, now you're working on a couple of other things because you didn't have enough to do before.
No.
So you added a few things like Godcasters?
Well, actually what we're doing is CDF, our faith division, because we have what we call remnant churches, right? We're really called embassy churches, but the remnant church, we don't need all the churches. God very seldom takes something big to defeat something big, right? He takes 5 loaves and 2 fish to feed the 5,000. David and Goliath, right? Exactly right. So we only need a remnant. So what we do is we're providing tools in this new war. So again, we're third graders on the beaches of Normandy. Now what? Okay, we're ready to fight, but now what? So Godcasters is one of those tools that we're presenting to churches. And the concept came from Adam Curry, who you know, Adam.
The Podfather, right?
Yeah, the Podfather,
MTV fan. Come on, everybody knows Adam Curry.
Everybody knows that.
Love Adam.
Created the first podcast. That's his claim to
He's fun.
Yes.
So, God laid on his heart to build a new platform. And the real vision was for the church to become the local news. Because we don't know, most local news has been gobbled up by the big guys anyway across the nation. So we don't get truth, right? So that's what Godcasters is. It's 24-hour, 24/7 radio station. And then you, the local church, then begins to feed, and you're hopefully going to help us with this, teaching local people how to be journalists and do a good job for the local communities. So that's one thing. But we have software that helps turn out the vote. We have our lawyers. We can educate and train and have facilitate if a church wants to produce some local leaders for the local city council or local school board. We want to provide tools that the denominations have backed away from. We teach our pastors, look, it's not only is it our role to take an active role in leadership in that local community, we're commanded to do it. And so
it's a works-based faith. There's actually work for us to do. And
sure.
Christians, a lot of Christians stopped wanting to do any work a long time ago.
Yeah. True faith has shoe leather with it.
Yes.
That's what I call it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So we've got it. And it's what's cool is when you see these churches that have been activated like this. Our home church is one of the greatest. Our pastor, Jack Hilligoss, he felt called to run for mayor. And we activated one precinct and got from 9% to like a 70% turnout. And last 3 elections, landslides. But not only that, we had a total of 16 positions replaced in 2 election cycles. 13 of the replacements came from our church. In the meantime, our church grew from 400 to over 1,500, and people have come to know the Lord. So, and our church has taken on the role. We got Godcasters coming in. We've started a private school. We said, wait a minute, we are responsible for our community, not the government. So that's the mindset shift where, no, God gave us a command, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We're going to build that kingdom to the best of our ability with God's help in our little town.
And you're not slowing down just because Donald Trump's in office.
Donald Trump is a tourniquet. I love him.
Thank God for him.
Thank God for him. Mm-hmm. But do you think I think you told me that the other day, they haven't dismantled USAID, have they?
No, not completely.
They shined the light on them.
Shoved it into the State Department.
So what happens when the next team comes, right? The bad guys come back. That system's still in place. So no, but we'd also tell people, look, you can't fix DC. You know, the biggest, a great definition, I think Jeff Bezos, I read one time, said this, but he says, stress is when you have a problem, but you have no way of addressing it. In other words, the problem's bigger than you. And so we tell pastors, look, forget about DC. Take care of your local community, which, by the way, you got a representative in DC that comes out of your local community, right? But focus on home. Now I can do something. I can feed the hungry. I can make sure the right people are on the school board. We can go and make sure the curriculum's right. There's things you can do. And when you get activated as a local community, especially a body of believers, it's exciting. And so our church, we have a volunteer group inside of our church, and their role is to watch everything civically. Why? Because Jesse, Moses' daddy-in-law, who was a sheep farmer, gave him the instructions on how to set up a structured government, basically. And he said, you look for 3 things in a leader. You're looking for leaders. Forget politics. We need leaders.
Sure.
What do leaders do? They fear God. Okay. They hate dishonest gain, and they're trustworthy, which means they do the right thing when nobody's looking.
Real leaders.
That's the 3 elements you need. Right? So we promote leadership in that local community because it's important. So anyway.
Well, where can people find you? If people are interested, if there's pastors and churches that want to be part of the Remnant Alliance, if there's people that need the help of CDF or want to volunteer,
just really
podcasters who want to be part of Godcasters.
Yeah.
So where do they go?
Just go to citizensdefendingfreedom.com. You can click on the Faith Division and you can see everything we just talked about. Citizensdefendingfreedom.com or the remnantalliance.com. And either one of those will get you there. But we appreciate that. But we've started that. We just started another brand new company on my entrepreneur side last couple of weeks ago. So we're not going to slow down. We got.
How's that working out, Ben? I know you've been trying to keep him on a stricter diet, get some rest, not work so much.
He's doing good. He's cooperating. Not work quite so much, but if I unplugged him from that, he really would die, I think. So it's good work is good.
Well, you've been at his side for 42 years and 5 years before you got married. So it must have been somewhat traumatic for you.
Again, you would think, right?
Yeah.
I don't feel traumatized. I don't know how to explain that. That's the miracle of this whole thing. That's another miracle in this whole thing. God was so good. When he talks about the shelter and the refuge and the peace that passes understanding, it really does, Laura. I can't explain it. Would I want to go through that again? No. On one hand, but on the other hand, I felt like for whatever reason, and maybe it's something still to come, I don't know. But my faith was strengthened, my family's faith, our children. I've never been more proud as a mom or validated by the Lord that my children, I know when I'm dead and gone, they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
They got the good stuff. They're going to be okay. And that means my grandchildren are going to be okay. So I'm at peace. I don't know how to explain it other than that. It gave me such peace, not trauma. I'm not going to let the devil steal this joy that was such a miracle. I've just been the, recipient of a miracle, and I'm nothing but grateful. I'm just grateful.
Honey understands.
Honey is with me.
Studio dog. Come on. Do you want to join me for the out? Let's say goodbye. Steve, do you have anything you want to say in closing?
Just encourage your audience, like I said earlier, just offers encouragement to hear the story. And God is real. Christ is real.
Yeah.
We're all going to meet him one day. And love your family and pass this on to your family, because we had a pastor, we did a podcast in Fernandina Beach, Pastor Zach Terry. He made a great comment, I thought, is we're all going to have crisis in our lives. It comes to the good and comes to the bad. But when the crisis happens, that's not the time to get your faith in order. It's your daily life. Live out that life of faith, and it's very helpful when you hit the crisis. Faith, family, and friends, I say. So
yeah, faith, family, friends, and freedom.
And freedom. Amen. Amen.
And you asked earlier, what would you say to people who didn't know God? And I would point them again to Scripture, Isaiah 55:6, where God, simply seek Him. Just seek Him while He can still be found. Mm-hmm. We're at the end of an era, I believe. I believe things are changing. We can feel it. We can all, the final harvest has begun. But God,
a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, and He promises that if you just seek Him, you will find Him.
If my people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And there's nothing difficult.
Seek my face and pray.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's the believers. Yeah.
Think of the thief on the cross. Never went to church. Never paid a dime in tithe. All he said was, "Lord, please remember me today."
Remember me.
You'll be in paradise with me today.
Well,
simple, childlike faith.
The sinner can repent right up to the moment of death, right? Mm-hmm. That was that lesson there. But the wicked spit in the face of God. So you don't want to be with the wicked. No, you don't want to be with the wicked.
Go be the light.
Go be the light. Honey, if you want to say thank you to Steve and Bev for joining us.
It's been a pleasure,
for this
honey.
episode. Oh, you so tired. You're so tired.
Worked hard today, Mom.
Thank you, Bev. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you for all you do. Yeah. Thank you for all you do. Keep it up. I'm here to encourage you.
You're a warrior. You're a warrior.
Well, I've
never seen.
And you are too. And I'm truly, it means a lot to me to be in this fight with you, both of you. I love you very much.
I love you too.
Thank you.
I know why you picked her. You picked a good one.
She rejected me for a long time, but I'm so glad she finally.
That's one of those stories we can talk about off camera, Bev. Thank you so much for being with us for this episode. Thank you for supporting our work, for giving up your time. Like, share, subscribe, do all of those good things if you can. And thank you for going rogue with Lara Logan. God bless. And Studio Dog, Lara Logan. And Studio, honey, what are you doing? Thank you so much. See you next episode.